Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on AI Advantage, unlocking innovation while avoiding data security disasters. All right. It's a beautiful spring day. I'm really excited to be with you. I'm Thomas Dodds, your host, founder, and CEO of slashBlue. We help firms protect their reputation and grow revenues through technology strategy, AI advisory, cybersecurity, and managed services. If you stay till the end, I have a special gift for you. Our guest today is information security consultant Randall Jeske. Randall has extensive experience in cyber. Thanks, Randall. Today, we'll explore how to identify and secure key data in your organization. As we all look forward to the AI opportunity that's in front of us, we want to give you some real practical tools so you can walk away today more confident of how you can step into AI without giving away your confidentiality or that of your customers. So, Randall, welcome. How long have you been working in cybersecurity?
Hey, Thomas, it's great to be here. I began my information security career in 2017. My first role was at a regional bank. My primary responsibility there was to identify and manage confidential data. Since then, I've expanded into many roles across the industry. Those include responsibilities around email security, vendor risk management, awareness training, data loss prevention and governance, among many other things as well.
That's great, Randall. Really glad you're here to help us. I mean, it's an important topic, something a lot of people don't like to dig too deeply into. So we're going to give you the deep stuff you're going to need, but really easy information on how you can protect yourself and your company. So for those listening in, maybe you've been one of those victims, but if you haven't been, it's easy to think it couldn't happen to our company or we're too small. Yet with the advent of AI, the risk and likelihood that you'll experience a breach is growing quite significantly. And in fact, Stanford research warns that without proper data classification, AI models can inadvertently expose sensitive information, personal information, private health information, customer information, leading to serious privacy breaches and loss of control over critical data. So, organizations that risk costly data breaches, regulatory fines, and security vulnerabilities are the ones that won't have the proper safeguards. And we want to help you with that today. So, let me help you with a personal story that each of you might relate to. So I was sitting at my computer, really excited about the potential of AI and wanting to use it to create a client proposal based upon previous work I'd done. I saw that ChatGPT required my phone number to sign up. I'm not sure I want to compromise my privacy that way and give my personal cell phone. I tried Microsoft Copilot instead. Then I discovered we needed an enterprise license to get a version that doesn't use my data for training. And so it could go out on the internet. I was stuck. I wanted to use AI, but I didn't want to risk exposing my customers' data or my own. So I almost gave in, knowing I'd regret it, but really wanting to get the help that I saw other people getting from AI. But instead, it stalled me out. So caught between wanting AI's benefits while keeping information private and the desire to get this great productivity boost, I was stuck. So today we'll discuss how to break through that privacy paralysis and open up innovation for your entire organization. So if any questions you have along the way, just pop them in the chat and we'll get to those at the end during the Q&A. So Randall, help us understand, how seriously should we take our data so that we can have both AI innovation and security?
Yeah, first of all, I'll share, Thomas, I really resonate with your story. Everybody wants to use AI, right? It's a
Yeah.
revolutionary tool that allows users to accomplish tasks in minutes or seconds when it might otherwise take hours or days. But your concerns are real, right? There are real life instances of these risks playing out with real world consequences. In fact, it's interesting you bring up Copilot because I remember at the Black Hat Security Conference last year, there was a security researcher that was demonstrating how Copilot can be a significant threat to privacy and also how threat actors can leverage these tools against you. It was a super fascinating demonstration. I think you can find it on YouTube if you look for it. It's called Living Off Microsoft Copilot.
Oh,
I highly
awesome.
encourage you to check it out. Now, you specifically asked about how to leverage proper data management to solve this problem. There are really three simple questions which I always start with to answer this, right? The first question is, how much data do you have? Second question is, where does your data live? And then you need to ask, who has access to it, right? Once you answer these three questions, you can then define a process and implement tools to protect your organization from most significant risks associated with data loss. Of course, those include AI there as well. Now, also answering these questions, though, isn't really as simple as it seems. I've talked to many, many different organizations about this topic specifically, and I've noticed a common trend. To demonstrate what I've noticed here, I'll ask you, Thomas, if I were to ask you, could you tell me right now how many sensitive files do you maintain with your business? And how precise do you think you can get with that answer?
Wow. How many people can answer that? And I couldn't until we went through the exercise. So I knew you were going to ask you this. So just to everyone here, I did write this down. I got this from
Mhm.
our CISO. So I had no idea that we had so many sensitive files when we went and did this. We had 62,260 sensitive and confidential client files. We want to protect our clients' reputation. So what damage would that cause them if that got out? What do we owe our
Absolutely.
customers?
Yeah.
We had 176,526 confidential company files that could do us damage, and we had 90,711 sensitive documents that contain PII, PHI that by government regulation we need to keep confidential. And we're a small company. How many files do you think larger companies have? So
Mhm.
I'm just curious, how often do you see others are able to answer that question?
Yeah, I'm actually very impressed that you had an answer to this because I've spoken to many, even chief security officers that didn't have an answer to this question, right? It is very, very common for an organization to not be able to answer those three questions. The reason for this is because kicking off a proper data management process when you never have done so before feels like an impossibly large chore. And in some cases, it is, right? But it is also an important one. Let me share a story that can kind of talk to about how important of a task this can be. Okay. I was working at one point with a financial services organization. We were tasked with identifying and cleaning up sensitive data around the whole organization. And
Mhm.
this was the first time in this organization's history where this cleanup occurred, at least to the extent of what we were doing. So, the first step of this was, of course, answering those three simple questions.
Right.
How much data was there? Where is the data and who has access to it? Right. We went around file shares. We explored their cloud, their SharePoint, their email, scanning for all types of confidential information. You know, it ranges from driver's license numbers, social security numbers, passwords. We even built our own regular expressions to find some of these things. It was quite fun. At the end of
Sounds
the
deep.
day, we found hundreds of
Oh
thousands
man.
of old documents that were past the retention period or no
Oh,
longer necessary. Hundreds of thousands of documents.
oh.
Some of these files were almost 2 decades old. Shocking information to know, right? We, of course, successfully disposed of those files. And can you imagine what could have happened if we didn't complete this task and there was a data breach? The reputational damage alone from losing that many files, some of them being 2 decades old, would have been a serious impact to that organization, right?
Yeah.
So not only did we clean up this data, it also allowed us to build a continuous process, of course, to ensure that old data was being disposed of continuously so we didn't have to achieve a cleanup of the scope again. So, with that story in mind, my recommendation for organizations that want to define a data management process, clean up old or unnecessary data, and really protect the data you need to keep around is to start by answering those three questions I keep referring to, right? How much data do you have? Where is that data? And who has access to it? Use what you learn to define a data classification
Mm.
process and framework. And then you can use that policy, that process to define the technical controls and create the employee training plan that you'll need to build the continuous data management process around it.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Randall. It's great insight. A lot of people might not realize that those hundreds of thousands of files, it's like, well, what if they get out? What do you have to do? It certainly could be embarrassing. It's like having some things, your private stuff published on the front page, but you also have an obligation to clients to notify everybody. If you've got hundreds of thousands
Mhm.
of documents and records, you've got to notify everybody touched by that
Yeah.
according to the law. So that's something to explore for your company. You know what laws in your jurisdiction, but there can be some serious hassle with that, and also reputational damage and other things. So, Randall, you've laid out these three simple questions to reveal the risk, and the first
Mhm.
in three steps to avoid data disaster. So, we use a process with our customers. It's really, really similar to that. Just number one is detect data that's in danger. Number two, define data protection policy. In other words, defining who's got access, how, where files are stored, like you said, and then what
Mhm.
constitutes sensitive data. And number three, determine actions and processes for data management, such as data classification controls, data access, training, AI, and more. So like in my personal example, it's people can put this on for themselves and say, okay, do I really want to give this data away? What information am I okay putting into systems personally for myself? And what actions am I going to take to prevent that? And how am I going to check out the systems and where the data goes? So you can relate to that personally and gain some confidence
Absolutely.
using AI once you understand that. More importantly, though, help your organizations develop this for yourself. So now that we have three clear steps, how do we actually apply this to artificial intelligence so we can begin taking advantage of the information available to us?
Yeah. One concept that I really like to keep in mind when I'm using any artificial intelligence tool, honestly, any tool at all, is the concept of zero trust. You've probably heard it before. It's kind of getting thrown around everywhere. Zero trust is a philosophy that, in its most simple form, means that you should never trust a system or process without first verifying that it is effective or secure,
Mhm.
right? So when we bring this idea to artificial intelligence specifically, I personally assume that any data I place into an AI system can be leaked.
Mhm.
So the approach that I take is to never grant AI tools access to sensitive data unless I know with a very high degree of certainty that it is safe to do so.
Yeah.
Never trust, always verify. That's what zero trust is. There's a reason I recommend this, specifically when talking about artificial intelligence. And in order to kind of tell this story, I want to refer back to those three simple questions we talked about earlier, right? How much data? Where is it? Who has access to it? So let's assume you know the answer to all of these questions before you start using an artificial intelligence tool. You know how much data you have, you know who
Mm.
has access to it, where it is. How does artificial intelligence change the picture, right? I'll start by asking kind of where does my data live, right? If you're using an artificial intelligence tool, there's a very good chance that any data you are feeding into that system lives in the training model for that tool. So now it not only lives in your environment where you expect it to be, but it also lives within the vendor that you are using in many cases. And
Mm.
further, if we then ask who has access to my data, the answer to that question when you're using an artificial intelligence tool is a little bit uncertain. And the reason for this is a vulnerability in many AI systems called a prompt injection attack. And I'll explain a little bit about what that is. Artificial intelligence systems, particularly when you're talking about generative AI, are built with privacy and technical safeguards in place to prevent not only data leaks, but also malicious use of those AI tools. These safeguards that are in place are very imperfect. And I'll give you an example around this, and you'll probably be familiar with this. You are technically not allowed to utilize ChatGPT to write a phishing email, right? If you ask the tool to do so, you go into ChatGPT, you said, write me a phishing email to this person around this topic, it's going to say no, it's not going to do it for you. However, what if you don't ask ChatGPT to write you a phishing email? What if instead you ask it to draft an email to someone about a topic that you know is top of mind for them, and then ask ChatGPT to include a link or an attachment in that email, right?
Mm. Yeah, I see.
You have just used ChatGPT to draft you a spearfish without ever asking it to do so, and it will do this for you, right? This is an example of a prompt injection attack. You can take that same idea to expose data that was used to train the data model. And there's been real world use cases of this actually happening. All you need to do is you simply need to know what questions to ask the tool and precisely how to ask them. That's all the vulnerability is. It's knowing what to ask. So that is why I recommend avoiding the utilization of artificial intelligence tools when you're specifically referring to confidential data. That is why you should not, in most cases, input confidential data into these tools.
What could happen if you do that, or what could happen in AI if your data lives somewhere else and somebody else gets access to it? I mean, it's still in the AI tool, right? It's not
Yeah.
like it's public and published on the internet.
Well, if somebody's taking advantage of one of those vulnerabilities, such as a prompt injection attack, they could publish that on the internet. There's a case of Samsung, I believe it was, a few years ago, who they were allowing their users to use artificial intelligence. They actually had to start blocking their users from doing so because some of their proprietary code, I believe, was starting to get leaked on the internet. The
Oh
reason
man.
it was leaked was because their users were pasting that code into artificial intelligence, and others got access to the training data, found that code, leaked it on the internet. So, real world circumstance of data that you put into AI isn't always going to stay within AI.
So one of the really good things, what I hope is happening in the minds of our listeners right now is that you're thinking of what would happen if my data got out there? What would the
Mhm.
damage be to our customers or us? And that's a great question to ask because you don't want to just do cybersecurity best practices for the sake of it. You need to calibrate it to the kind of risk. I mean, if you have to protect your customer data and your private data and PHI and PII, which we're legally obligated to protect, you've got to think about what would happen there and then tailor your response to that. So I'm really, really encouraged to hear about this data first approach, Randall. So understanding access and what restrictions are appropriate. So what's our next step? How do we do this? Ensure that AI systems are handling data properly.
Yeah, so when you're talking about a data first approach and determining what system you want to use, right? You know you want to use an artificial intelligence system. How do you figure out which one is appropriate for you? The answer to that is simply to have a vendor cyber risk management process, right? You need to ensure you work with a trusted vendor whose privacy and data usage processes are well documented. You can do this by reading through their terms of services, understanding how they train their models and what they do with their data when it's in their hands, right? You can consider if that third party has a security certification, like a SOC 2 report. And
Yeah,
this can really all be achieved through a very standard vendor risk management process.
that's great. Really invaluable information. I hope it's bringing some awareness for people. The three simple questions you asked, along with what I outlined as a detect, define, determine framework, should help everyone here. And we'll provide all our attendees with a toolkit containing the security classification matrix that we use, which is a deeper dive on what we talked about, a review of
Mhm.
the process we outlined today with the zero trust perspective built in so you can start thinking about this for yourself, and an access control blueprint, which gives you what are the primary things you can do to protect yourself. First, I want to explain to you how you get additional support. You can visit our website at slashblue.com. And I've got a particular link I'll give you here in just a minute for this webinar. I'll paste it in here once we get back here. Start with our diagnostic, and you can schedule a no obligation call, and we'll help you achieve your objectives faster and overcome technology challenges while maintaining security. So not only can we help tailor this for the AI, we can help you figure out which AI programs are going to help you in achieving your objectives faster here. So we currently have a special offer for webinar attendees this quarter ending March 31. We've got one slot already taken by qualified companies, and we're offering a complimentary cybersecurity assessment, AI readiness and strategy analysis, and technology strategy, including a free penetration test. So first come, first serve. We've got one slot left on that. For those who stayed with us, you'll receive an ebook summarizing these insights to share with colleagues. So let's move on to the Q&A, see what questions we've got here. So Randall, I guess number one, can you share some real world examples of implementing these principles and common mistakes to avoid?
Yeah, so when I've been implementing these things, I've made many mistakes, as everyone has. One thing I've learned when you're tackling data classification and data protection is really to manage it in bite-sized chunks. Many of our listeners likely work with thousands, if not millions of files. It is very easy to get overwhelmed when you first start adopting these policies and tools. And when you get overwhelmed, you make mistakes, right? So I recommend keeping it small. Maybe you start with your highest risk information or highest risk people and expand from there, right? Maybe instead of defining a full classification framework, you only start by defining what you would consider confidential and use that as a starting point. Another thing I've learned when doing this is to balance automation with manual processes. Everybody wants to do automation, rely completely on it. Automation is great, but a lot of these automated tools simply look for patterns, right? And information doesn't always match a specific pattern perfectly. So, for that reason, automation is imperfect when you're scanning for confidential data. It will only ever get you most of the way there, right? It can come with false positive, it can miss things. You also have to rely on your users to tell you when they're working with the sensitive files so that you can get the full picture of the things that automation missed. So make sure you consider that when you're building a process. Place an equal amount of attention on training users as you do to automatically label those files.
That just follows good cybersecurity oversight principles in general. We've got a simple video of 7 steps where we do oversight. Part of that is training, cybersecurity awareness, it's data awareness. And another part of that is really the automation, but also like having a security operations center or a SOC looking at those things that come across and trying to use human judgment, what the tools will raise up to see if it's actually a critical issue for you. So I wanted to highlight again where you can go if you need to get some help from this. If you'd like to explore this with us, go to slashblue.com/AI-advantage. And if you could put that up on the screen, please. Well, then you can sign up to our discovery call with me. We can talk about your particular issues, and you could see if you qualify for our special offer today. So secondly, another question for you, Randall. How do we know if our current AI tools are secure?
Sure. Yeah. There's a couple of key indicators, right? Is the tool you're using SOC 2 compliant? That can give you really deep insight into their internal cybersecurity and privacy practices. Do they have data at rest encryption? Do they have very clear data retention and protection policies? Do they have options to allow you to opt out of using your data to train those models? Keep an eye out for all of those things, because those could be very key indicators in whether it's safe to work with the tool that you're selecting.
That's great advice. And we can use that in our company policies, which every company needs to have. And we can use that personally when we're looking at tools and what we're going to use. So that's fantastic. So we got another question came in. Would you say that company AI tools that the companies use, are they safe to use? So Marielle highlighted questions here like Mimecast and Exabeam. So these 2 tools that she mentioned are enterprise class tools. What we mean by that is tools that are known for their transparency, their integrity. They're known for being researched, and they're known for being used by larger companies and enterprises. So we can follow a lot of their leads. So, safe is a relative question. We can say trusted because we know that they're doing things that are respected and that are followed in the industry. And they're not cutting corners to try and shave costs and pass off like, hey, if you just check this box, like we see a lot of managed service provider tools or just check the box tools are super cheap, but they don't actually do a whole lot for you. They just kind of say, well, yeah, I've got this SIEM tool that monitors or looks at my endpoint protection, and it can shut down certain things in an event of attack, but it doesn't really help you with the comprehensive whole. And it might mislead you to think you're doing things you shouldn't. So tools like Mimecast, Exabeam, number 1, you want to use enterprise class tools. Number 2, you want a team that's going to be operating those, that knows how to use them, that's trained in them, and that has excellent processes and transparency. Here's what we did, here's what we found, and here's how it affects you. And that's what you should be getting back. And you saw that in the video before our call here, that we do that as part of our tools as well.
Whenever you're working with a vendor of any sort, regardless if it's AI or not, you're balancing risk with the benefit you get of working with that vendor. I've seen claims data of in 2024, somewhere around 30% of ransomware attacks involved third parties. It's ridiculous amounts of risk there. But also, these vendors provide very important tools and services that you need to operate your business. Mimecast is a very great tool that can help protect you from cybersecurity attacks. So anytime you're working with a vendor, regardless if it's AI, you're really making a decision that this vendor is worth the risk that they present when you're using them. It's always a decision model around that.
So for those that don't know, what is a third-party vendor? What is third-party in this case? Can you illustrate how that would work for our listeners?
It is any company or organization that you are working with that is not, at least in my opinion, not directly affiliated with your company, right? You could have a vendor that you work with in your supply chain, right? Maybe you're purchasing something from that vendor. Maybe they're a cybersecurity vendor. Maybe they're an IT vendor. Think your Microsofts, your Mimecasts, right? All of those things. Really, any external Bluebeam, any external company that you are in some form affiliated with, or you're purchasing services or tools from them, they're a vendor.
Yeah. So part of the due diligence, if 30% of attacks come through them, you want to know what those tools that you're using are doing to protect your data and that security. Who has access to it, right? And then what are those? Even what are your supply chain partners doing security-wise as well? Absolutely. You want to know that. So what is the first thing that we should do on Monday morning, or maybe Friday morning? Because everyone gets excited about cybersecurity. Everyone's going to do this first thing tomorrow, I know. What's the first thing you?
First thing you should do if you don't know how much sensitive data you have is figure out how much sensitive data you have. Do that research, answer those 3 questions, and see if you can get a very good understanding of where your data lives and how much is there. Because I'll tell you, a lot of organizations don't know that answer, and it's very important.
And this is something that internal IT is going to can often struggle with. You want
Mhm.
your security provider helping with this. You know, when I gave that example earlier of hundreds of thousands of files, we're a smaller company, and hundreds of thousands of files, you can't do that manually. You need to have the right tool sets, people train the tool sets to do it. But we'll give you the steps as to how we do it. And if you need some more help, reach out for help at slashblue.com/AI-advantage, and we can help you out.
One more thing to consider when you're what to do on Monday, figure out how much data you have. This isn't just file shares, right? This isn't just SharePoint. How much data lives in your emails, right? How long are you
Oh
keeping your
yeah.
emails around, and
Oh yeah.
how much information actually lives there? You'd be very surprised. You got to think about all these things on endpoints in your downloads folder. I have found shocking amounts of detail of information in those 2 locations that most people don't think of.
Yeah, in databases and business intelligence
Database, yeah,
dashboards and financial ledgers, you've got
yep,
data everywhere.
everywhere.
Okay. That seems a little daunting, but I know that, I got this report. I'm like, okay, here's all the files. It gave me great peace of mind. I'm like, oh, there's hundreds of thousands. I'm like, wow. But at the same time, okay, you found all this. That's great. Now you know where it is. Now we can
Mhm,
figure out who's got access and what we want to do about it.
absolutely.
So how do we balance security with productivity? So last question, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, so everything about cybersecurity is balancing security with productivity, right? My recommendation here for this is really to create clear guidelines for different data types. Public data can be very safely used with public AI tools. Maybe even internal data that you don't necessarily deem confidential can be safely used. Really try to focus in on those specific data types and what you really care about and what you don't. What I typically try to do is I try to put all of my confidential information into specific buckets. So, for example, maybe I'm working with a payroll vendor, right? Every company has payroll, every company has to manage payroll documents. You should keep all of your payroll documents in a bucket with your payroll vendor. Don't have it spread across your SharePoint, don't have it in your emails, all that stuff. Keep it within your payroll vendor. That way, instead of having to
Uh,
restrict access to your whole environment, you just have to not use AI within that specific bucket that you've deemed as confidential. That's where I usually start with that.
That's great principle. So really good. So there's a lot here today, Randall, and let everyone join me in thanking Randall for coming on today, sharing your expertise with us, helping us to avoid data disasters while being more confident about how we can use AI. So I know that as a business leader, I feel much more confident now that we have a private AI instance. We know what our files are. We know where our sensitive data is. And our security tools are reviewed before we get data uploaded into them. Our data is properly classified. We know what systems we've got and what access is, and we've got the confidence to be able to use AI when we want to use a new system. So, best of all, our employees get full training on those protocols so that we know that other people aren't going to make the mistakes that we think that we're tempted to make as well. We want to get everyone in the company on board. So take these tips. You're going to get a copy of the ebook here very shortly after the webinar today. Reach out if you need some help. And I really appreciate if you'd fill out the survey for this. Let us know how this was, how helpful this was for you, and what else you'd like to hear about so that we can bring you things that really can help you and accelerate your results, your protection and reputation, and your growth in your company. So thanks for joining us today. Have an awesome, awesome day.
Client trust is almost impossible to replace. They trust us to keep their information secure. And we have to do that, and we take it very seriously. I don't even want to put a price on that. My name is Matt Fultz. I'm a managing partner of a consulting engineering firm, and I spend every day solving problems. Our clients care about cybersecurity because of the businesses that they're in, the size of the company, the level of liability that they can face, the number of attacks that they're under. In addition to that, we as a growing firm are exposed to liability as well. About 25% of our annual revenue is exposed to cybersecurity liability requirements. Ransomware alone could tank our business for months. It could cost us years of potential revenue. That kind of extended downtime wasn't worth risking to us. The game is always changing. We want to focus on what we're good at and serve our clients in the way we serve our clients. That's certainly not cybersecurity. We're using slashBlue for cybersecurity oversight, but also just help in understanding cybersecurity and what the risks are, educating our staff, educating our IT people, making sure that as business owners, we're aware of the potential risks and liabilities we're exposed to. We're looking for help across the board on all that. The biggest thing slashBlue has solved in terms of cybersecurity for us is peace of mind. There's too many moving parts and too much change in that industry for us to understand. Knowing that they have our backs and they're always there for us if something happens is the biggest help we need. All in all, we're having about $20 million a year protected from cyber attacks by slashBlue. And I feel confident knowing that we're meeting all the criteria across the board, that we're protecting ourselves from risk. I am getting reported updates on how we compare to the industry, how we compare to our industry specifically, what standards we're meeting within those criteria, and making sure that our score on cybersecurity is above and beyond what's necessary. The added benefit has been the education of our staff. In our instances of problems related to data access that shouldn't be allowed has been really helpful. If you have any concern at all about cybersecurity in your business, I highly encourage you to get in touch with slashBlue.